All right. So, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, we're very happy to be here. We hosted a conversation. We called it. We did one yesterday morning in Spanish, and we were very happy to be able to share this information and support to the community. And today we're going to be dedicating it to the community, but in English. So the intention behind this presentation is really to be able to open up our hearts, our counseling hearts, our hearts as well as people, as human, and be able to provide both information to the community in a way, show support that we're here, but also to talk a little bit about what the stressors that we've been living through this current physical distancing during COVID-19, and then also maybe some changes or shifts that have occurred in relationships, and be able to provide support in that regard. So I'll go ahead and get started and introduce myself. My name is Jasmine Silva. I'm an LPC intern, and my supervisor is Gerardo Rosas, and I'm an employee here at Counseling of El Paso. And Crystal will go ahead and introduce herself.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah.
My name's Crystal Martinez Acosta. I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor in the state of Texas, and I also work at Counseling of El Paso.
Yay.
And we'll pass it to Memo, I think.
Guillermo. Okay, well, my name is Guillermo Castañeda. I'm a licensed professional counselor here at Counseling of El Paso. I work with cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR and hypnosis with pain. That's my specialty, pain management.
Okay, my name is Guillermo Castañeda Sr. I'm professional hypnotist. I studied in Mexico City, in the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, since 1968. 1968. And I studied hypnosis, professional hypnosis, in Sociedad Mexicana de Hipnosis Clínica y Experimental in Mexico City also, since 1979. And I'm working also. I'm a member of the team and Counseling of El Paso.
There you go. So, we're very happy to be here, and we will open up our hearts to the community now. So one of the things that we want to talk about and kind of bring into awareness is the stressors that we might be living during this physical distancing. They're one of the things that we've noticed is that everyone has had different perspectives, different impacts, and maybe even intensity levels regarding physical distancing and all the implications surrounding it. So we wanted to take a little bit of time and just talk about what are the different stressors that we've seen due to this current physical distancing. So I just kind of want to open it up as a roundtable with our team members, and for us to have an opportunity to share what we've seen are some of the stressors that we've noticed.
Well, I think that one of the stressors has been the fact that we have lost our liberty, per se. That we're unable to get out of our homes and go places. Before, we used to go to restaurants, we used to go to the movies, we used to go to the mall, we used to go anywhere. And now, because of our own safety and that of the people around us, now we have to remain at home, and we have to just wait it out. And that can definitely create a lot of stress. And of course, the people at home can also create some stress for us.
Yes, at the beginning. Okay, go ahead.
There's also the financial aspect, the financial stress, because as we're unable to go to work, are we going to get paid? People that own small businesses, are they going to be able to pay their employees? So there's a lot of financial stress as well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, good point. Hmm.
Yeah, at the beginning looks like a little bit funny, but a few days later is not funny at all. Not funny.
Yeah.
Right. It might feel like, oh, this is easy, how fun. And then it's like, I'm not sure I really like this as much anymore for people, right?
Right.
Yeah, or maybe some people were taking it as like, wow, this is like extended vacation because I know that it happened kind of during spring break time. Um, and then it was kind of like there were these dates being set for like we're gonna reopen in 2 weeks, and then again in 3 weeks, and then again in 4 weeks, and then 2 months from now. So then it's just been extending. And I think the stress of that uncertainty, like not being able to have like a definitive time for when we're going to be able to leave our houses again, I think that puts people into a sense of like grief. And that's something that we talked about in one of our webinars that we did a couple weeks ago, how we're grieving the loss of our freedom. We're grieving many different losses. If we've lost people to COVID-19 or the disease, and that we're grieving that loss too. And just grieving a sense of normalcy. So being able to leave the house to go to work, grieving our finances, like Guillermo said, and then just everything else. So it's an interesting time, because not only is it just like one person grieving this and we see the story of one person on the news or something, it's everybody.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that as you shared that, it also reminded me about like May and like April, there's so many holidays or so many like life events for people, such as graduations or perhaps weddings. And it can be really difficult to be able to cope or adjust. And one of the things that came to mind as you were sharing that, Crystal, was also like the activation, like for us, including ourselves and for the community, if we were having challenges, for example, with anxiety or depression or any mental health symptoms, perhaps this could have either magnified it or in some cases it could also reduce it, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And there's also the stress of the people that have to go to work. For the people that, for example, work at supermarkets, the people that drive the trucks, the essential workers, the people at the hospitals, that also brings a lot of stress because uh, they worry about their own safety.
Yes, go ahead.
Also, several people also are not believing in the problem. And this is a big problem also because they are not protected. They are working or playing as ever. Then this is not very good because this situation can be extended our confinement.
Yeah, it definitely can. When we're noticing that people are not taking that social distancing, or when we notice that people are not wearing the masks, or for example, even the protests, that makes other people stressed because it's kind of like, well, you're spreading it, and when am I going to go back to work? And which is understandable why some people are actually going through this situation, because they're going through the same situation that everybody else is, through the same uncertainty. And so for them, it's the same thing. Let me go and protest because I want to get back to work. I want to make sure that I'm able to pay my mortgage or my rent. I want to make sure that I'm able to buy food. So it's not to say that that's an excused behavior, because of course you're putting everybody else at risk and also the essential workers, but it's understandable where they're coming from.
Right, and it makes me think about how things are not black and white and how it could be very gray some areas. And it made me think about also like the understanding of like just being able to understand like, you know, what you were mentioning right now, like um, just what are their needs, and perhaps they're trying to satisfy the needs that they have, and it might look different for all of us, right? When we look at like our human needs, it might be that we're focused more perhaps on like health needs. Maybe that might be our priority. Maybe it might be security needs, financial needs. So for everyone it could be different, but I think that we're all trying to perhaps survive. And I know you had mentioned a little bit before about our defense mechanisms. What happens to us when we go into survival mode? Who would like to kind of like talk about that from the four of us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very interesting because as we're going through survival mode, we learned a long time ago, since thousands of years, that we go through a situation where our brain gets activated, and so we have the fight or flight system. Before, it used to be that you would see a saber tiger, for example, and you would think, "Hey, I don't want to be prey to this saber tiger, so I'm gonna run, or I'm gonna stand still. I'm gonna do something's gonna happen so that I'm not prey to the survivor. If I'm with a lot of like my tribe or something, I'm going to fight it." So we have not gotten away from that fight or flight system because it's part of us. So as we're going through this situation, now it gets triggered because we try to get into survival mode. So for example, one of the as I mentioned before, I work with cognitive behavioral therapy, which has to do a lot with the thought process. So in a survival mode, it's a lot easier to see threats and to see the negative side of our thoughts, to kind of wonder. And this is something for example, I have the fortune telling belief, or cognitive thoughts. Um, I have also the mind reading, and with all of those, it's my mind usually goes into this mode of I don't know what's going to happen in the future. So now that creates a lot of stress. And so now it's a situation that really we have a lot of unknowns. And so a lot of people get triggered by this.
Right.
Our mind is in survival mode, not thriving mode.
And I wanted to invite Crystal. I know that you have a very like a very good background, a lot of experience on trauma. And I was wondering, as Memo shared this, what are your thoughts or views regarding and how this might relate to trauma as well?
Yeah, I think that some of the things that I'm thinking about as you all are talking about this as a collective traumatic experience is that trauma is subjective. And so something that is traumatic to me might not be traumatic to somebody else. So I understand that this event, this worldwide event, has really upended a lot of our lives. And I think that there are some people out there who have, so there's some research that shows, this is where my brain's going. So there's some research that shows that only about 20% of people who experience a traumatic event actually get PTSD. So the good news about that is that we have a pretty low likelihood or percentage of getting like a long-term type of mental disorder from something like this. And some of the things that protect us from those symptoms are being around family, Also, if you have just the idea of like privilege and being able to have stability financially, being able to still provide for your family. And I know that a lot of times, some of the more vulnerable populations, like you were talking about, Memo, is like the people who are essential workers. So, what concerns me about this epidemic is just the access to care that different essential workers have, or the lack of access to care that they have. So, if let's say somebody who's working at a grocery store who makes minimum wage, but they're constantly being exposed to this disease, but they feel like they have to go to work, that can really do a number on their stress. And it's going to be that type of stress is going to be experienced very differently than somebody who has a lot more privilege and access. And so that's just kind of what goes through my mind. And so this is in relation to protective factors. So what can we do to protect and support our essential workers and the more vulnerable populations, people who are elderly, who are more susceptible to being lonely and isolated, even though they were already lonely before this epidemic. And so it just exacerbates all of those issues. And I think it's really important to be aware of the differences that the way people are going to experience this traumatic event. That's what it makes me think of.
True.
Right.
And another thing is each member of a family, of a group, is experimenting different situation because most of the times they are in different, with different perspective of the situation. This produce conflicts between the members of the family. Then this is your specialty, Jasmine. What do you want to speak about it?
Right. And I think that that's a very good point because one of the things that can happen, as you were mentioning about the protective factors, Crystal, I was thinking about the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is a beautiful nerve that starts right here, and it's our natural calming system in our bodies. And the way you can stimulate it is you can stimulate it through nice deep breath and actually by also like physically touching that part of our body, but also it gets stimulated like face to face, that person to person. So what happens is that whenever we experience that, it really sends signals of safety, security, and it's a felt safety. So if we are not in it, perhaps in a home environment, or perhaps we feel lonely, it might be difficult to be able to have that felt safety. So as you're sharing that, it makes me think about like the anxiety that might manifest itself in the body as well. So if the body's not really it's feeling anxious, yes, I think we're also going to see maybe more negative automatic thoughts. Maybe our thoughts might be more racing, maybe more fortune telling or mind reading. And for the other individuals in the family, if they're not having perhaps symptoms like Crystal was saying, because it is very subjective, it might be hard to be able to understand perhaps a family member where they're coming from or why they're having the symptoms that they're feeling, right? But yes, most definitely, I think that what some of the ingredients that really come to mind is when I think about like everything that we're living through is the home environment, meaning the relationships, the quality, are they safe? Do they feel secure? Meaning, do we feel accepted in the relationship? And do we feel like we are connecting and engaging with one another, or are we just two individuals kind of like isolated in our own homes? That can also create more physical, emotional isolation. And then the other one that is super important is, are we having moments of playfulness? Are we having moments of engagement? That also creates a lot of protective factors as well. So, thank you for asking, Guillermo. I did want to ask you too, for the group, what are some of the impacts or changes that perhaps you've noticed in relationships and dynamics? I know that y'all have seen different uh, patterns or made different observations.
So I think that everybody has stressors. And as we all mentioned, everybody has a different kind of
Oh,
stress.
you
The
slowed
people, when we
down a
come
little
together.
bit there.
Okay,
There you go.
there we go. So, wait. No, so, so you put everybody together,
He was
and
doing it on purpose.
there's going to be a clash. And that's the thing that, you know, now I'm stressed about financials, but maybe my wife is stressed about not being able to go out. And now, different stressors or maybe the same. And when you have that in the relationship, people are going to clash with each other. As I was mentioning, about the CBT, and I don't want to make this a CBT lesson, but it is my little passion here. So a lot of this goes to back to the mind reading, and so the mind reading is my kind of cognitive distortion, as we call them, that we think like, hey, you know what? I know what the other person is thinking about, or there's a lot of personalization. If the other person is kind of quiet or they're pensive, maybe I'm thinking that it's about me. And so a lot of reactions are going to come out of that kind of thinking. So this is where we kind of try to look at the thoughts, and we want to identify them as they're going through, and now we can change them. We can do something about them. So yeah, I think that a lot of distortion, oh, I'm sorry, a lot of conflict is coming out from a distortion that we can all fall into. I mean, that's a human thing. Everybody can have a cognitive distortion.
I'm raising my hand here.
Right? And
It's
so
normal.
that's what we want to look at. How to identify those thoughts before they become an issue.
Yeah, and I think like you said earlier, if you're in an activated state in your brain, so what we know about trauma is that it changes the way your brain functions. And so based on some research about the brain, what comes to my mind is Dr. Daniel Siegel and how he talks about like the areas of the brain that get activated during a traumatic or a stressful event.
Yeah.
And all of that reframing and talking and expressing and being able to really rationally think through your thoughts and your behaviors and your actions and your feelings, all of that takes place in the frontal lobe, which is like where your forehead is. And so we also have the reptile brain, which is kind of back here. And so what that area is responsible for back here is like survival. So like you were talking about evolution, and it's also referenced as the reptile brain. And so whenever that part is activated, both of them can't function at the same time. It's either or. So either you're in an activated state or you're in a frontal lobe state. And so that's kind of like where I feel people in the same household who have been quarantined for a really long time with each other, it can get a little messy because everybody's brain is different. And like I said, not everybody experiences trauma. So one person in the family might be experiencing trauma, their back brain is activated. You might be telling them, for example, what comes to my mind is like kids doing homework. They're at home doing schoolwork, and schoolwork is all done by this part of the brain up here. And so if we go with the logic of the front brain and the back brain can't work at the same time, then we're going to have kids that aren't able to, if they are activated or anxious, they're not going to be able to do schoolwork because this part of the brain is not being accessed. So as as far as relationships go, I think it really ties in well to like cognitive behavioral therapy, like you were saying, Memo, because people aren't going to be able to talk through emotions and be able to rationally think about what the other person said. So like if somebody says like something simple, for example, like, hey, did you leave this mug here on the counter? The other person who's activated in survival mode and is anxious, they're going to be like, what the heck? Why are you always talking to me about this mug and you're always after me about cleaning up? And it's like, whoa, dude, calm down. But that's
Right.
because, and the reason they're activated is because who knows, maybe they're being triggered by something, especially if they've had like a history of trauma before and then they're experiencing trauma again because of this epidemic, then they're going to be extra triggered. So I think the important thing to consider is the brain, and that's just kind of like my lens, being able to think of, okay, do you feel safe right now? Are you safe enough to function right now?
Most
Right.
definitely.
Right. And one of the things that I wanted to share as you were mentioning that, I think that one of the concepts that came up for me was the power of co-regulating, especially. So this will be when we were talking when you were mentioning about children, or even in couples or just family members. There might be a family member who perhaps is not being triggered or having symptoms or really being impacted. So those are going to be very important pillars in the family, because they will have the power to co-regulate individuals in the family. So co-regulating goes back to that vagus nerve that we have. It's in our wiring. It's part of our body. So once, and this is a very non-verbal language. So our body, our brain, our primitive part will recognize safety in the way in our tone of voice, in the way we move, in our affect, like in the way our face looks. So when the other individual feels that safety, that's actually going to be a protective factor and help the other individual co-regulate. So meaning, let's say somebody is really activated here and this individual is in their window of tolerance, they're calm, they're okay. So this individual is going to naturally, because of mirror neurons, it's going to naturally match this individual here. So that's part of the co-regulating. And then it can also occur, maybe they're really down, and then little by little they can also start co-regulating. They can meet them also in a window of tolerance where they feel like they're actually connecting. We don't connect, like you were saying, when we're like too mismatched. We're like not really connecting, right? And that's just something that I wanted to share, as you were mentioning about the power of both the reptilian brain and the prefrontal brain as well.
So, Jasmine, if I could, have you maybe talk about those mirror neurons, because many people don't know about them, and you just mentioned them. So maybe just let people know what they are.
Okay, so it might be something like this. So perhaps it's basically our ability to match each other. So we match each other first, like physically, and then we start feeling perhaps in a way what the other individual is perceiving. It's part of also like empathy, but it's also a way, since the time that we're born, that's how we communicate. So that as babies, we learn to mirror our parents' neurons to be able to recognize both safety, recognize emotions, and be able to communicate what we're feeling. So that's basically what happens. And sometimes that's what might occur is that we might even start like noticing that our body language might match, or that our expressions might start matching, is because we're matching each other. It's like a pattern. We're connecting, connecting, connecting. So that's basically, anybody else would like to add maybe to that, or does that capture it for you?
I
No,
was
that was a good
thinking about,
explanation.
Yeah.
yeah, when you mentioned about mirror neurons right now and even matching, I was thinking how when you have couples, many people say like, oh, they start to look alike. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it has to do with those mirror neurons, that they're just matching each other, and they're kind of there comes this sense of, look, they're kind of even talking the same way or they're doing the same thing. It's weird, but that's how it goes.
Probably.
Yeah,
I
I don't
think
know
Also,
if there's
so.
research on that, but it sounds like it
that may
makes a
be
lot of
interesting.
sense.
and also, this process can be enforced by the hypnosis, because through the hypnosis we can to give orders to our brain to produce more or less the substances in there. Then it is possible to reinforce this situation. Especially through hypnosis, we can manage the stress, we can manage the anxiety, and we can manage some several emotions. This helps to the couples to be better between them.
Yeah. So one of the things about hypnosis is that, it's a deep relaxation. That's, it works with the subconscious mind, and the person, they have full control of themselves and everything else, but they're not going to sleep. They're just relaxed. And it's kind of interesting because what's the opposite of stress and what's the opposite of anxiety, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Relaxation.
Relaxation.
So
Mhm.
that's why hypnosis is very valuable in this sense as well. I think that you've got a great point, Guillermo.
But it's a relaxation more than the regular relaxation, because we manage also the brain frequency. The, we don't have a, dream. We don't have the people dreaming or sleeping. We are before the dream, before the sleep.
Yeah,
And
right.
the people is totally, the people in hypnosis is totally conscious, totally conscious.
Yeah, right before the dream, right before the people fall asleep, there's this opening of the subconscious mind, and that's where it's been able to program. I think that that's a great point.
Right. And when you share that, I kind of want to clarify because I'm wondering if people are thinking it's like a computer, right? But I'm thinking of like it's the power of like ideas, right? And beliefs and suggestions. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes,
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
yes.
And the
And,
subconscious mind is the most powerful part of the mind.
mhm.
Because it,
In hypnosis, we don't have orders. We don't exercising any domination over another mind. This is
Mm-mm.
not possible. It's a work shared between two persons,
right,
the client and the hypnotist.
right.
Yes. That's right. And I wanted to open up another conversation as far as what are some of the recommendations according to like your approach or in your personal experience or professional experience that have been either helpful is to help reduce stress and then to also help increase health in our relationships.
Audrey,
Um,
we're going. Okay, go
Go
for it.
do you
ahead.
want to?
Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So some of the things that come to my mind are just kind of like communication strategies that I've taught some of my clients. So for example, if we go back to the mug example that I gave earlier, like if your partner or spouse or family member, your mom or your dad is like, "Did you leave this mug here?" They didn't say it in a judgmental way or anything like that, but then if you just your brain is just like, like you just kind of like want to react to that and get upset about it. What I would do is coach you to then do something called stop and think, and then respond. So then taking anywhere from a 3-second pause to a 5-second pause before you answer them. So in your head, counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's kind of like your stop. And then
Right.
think about what they said and then respond accordingly, because there's a difference between reacting and responding. And so what we don't want to do, and what can cause a lot of damage in relationships, is when you react. When you react and you're like, you start flying off the handle, and you can say things that you regret because you're in a heightened emotional state. So just doing something very simple like that, or even taking a deep breath before you answer them, and then going on and proceeding with the conversation. So something like that might be useful. And the other thing that comes to my head is I statements or I messages. So a lot of times when we get upset or we want to engage in conflict with people, the language is really you-centered. So for example, if I want to talk to Memo about something and I say, Memo, you left my computer on and you're always so irresponsible with my computer.
No, I'm not.
So then he's going to get all defensive and he's going to be all peleonero. And
right there. Right
yeah,
there.
exactly. And so maybe a better approach would be something that starts with an I. So starting whenever you want to make a comment to a loved one, or somebody that you're in a relationship with, starting with the letter I, starting your sentence with I. So I feel a little bit upset when you leave my computer on because the battery dies. I'm wondering if you can please turn the computer off when you're done with it. So it's a way to get both of your needs met, and it's a way for you to express yourself without kind of just like swallowing that or being able to push that issue or shove it in under the rug. You're bringing it to light, but you're doing it in a non-attacking way. So using I messages.
Most definitely. And I think that also one of the things that we need to start noticing is the stress that we have, and what can we do to prevent it in the first place. So for example, setting the day. And how do you do that? From the moment that you wake up, just whatever you do at the moment that you wake up, it's going to set your day. So if you're watching the news and you're watching I don't know, some news channel, and
Coronavirus daily.
Yeah.
You wake up.
Yeah.
No, but it's what are you watching? They're gonna give you the news that are gonna spike your cortisol level, and cortisol is a stress hormone. So once you get that on yourself, you're going to get the stress, and this is gonna be how you're gonna be doing throughout the day, unless you stop it. But it's really hard to stop it because you don't even know that you have it on you.
That's
So
right. Mm-hmm.
the very thing is, hey, what can I do? Maybe I can do some meditation. Uh, Maybe I can read about good news. Even there's what's his name, John Krasinski, is that his name, from The Office?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He even
Krasinski.
brought out like a YouTube channel where he only talks about good news. And so just understanding, like, this is where I'm a little bit more positive throughout the day, and then I can see little news here and there, but I choose the news that I want to see. So instead of going and watching 30 minutes of news, I go online and I click on the news that I want to read for a little bit, for like 5 to 10 minutes, and that's it. I'm done, and I continue throughout my day. This gives me a lot of positive outlook, that when I'm talking to my spouse, or when I'm talking to my kids, or anybody living at home at that moment, now I'm not as triggered, and there's a lot of better relationships as well.
It really reminds me about Jim Quick's work on memory and attention. And one of the things that he says is that in the morning, the way we start, either we can become reactive or responsive. Like we can either respond to things. And I think that's one of the ingredients that you were sharing is, if we're feeling activated again, like Crystal was mentioning about about our lower brain, we're going to be more likely to be reactive rather than responsive, perhaps, like you're saying, starting in a very nice, calming, or gentle way our day, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this has an explanation. The explanation is our brain is working when we are awake between 14 and 28 cycles per second, mainly. When we are sleeping, we are between zero point 0.5 and 7 cycles per second. When we are uh, uh, making the transition between sleep and be awake, we are between 7 and 14 cycles per second. In this frequency, our subconscious mind is very, very sensitive. If we take advantage of this time, we can to program our brain to have a better day. But it needs to be when you open your eyes. When you open your eyes, you can program your day. Also, when you are sleeping, when you are almost sleeping, you can program your brain to be better during the night and during the next day.
Yeah, most definitely. So that's why it's a good idea to also not watch the news at night, right before we go to sleep, or deactivate it. When we talk about relationships, if we're having a problem with our with somebody at home, that's we probably should resolve it before we go to sleep, because that remains in our mind as we sleep, and it's a good idea to do it.
Yes, and I wanted to make a connection to that. Well, actually, I have two connections. One to Crystal's comment too, and then one to you. But I guess I'll go to Crystal's. When you were mentioning about like using I statements, it is very powerful. It reminds me about John Gottsman's work when it comes to couples. I like the his approach when it comes to the four horsemen, the patterns, the interactions that can come up when we're talking to each other. And what I like about it is that I've seen that you can see those patterns in other relationships between parent and child communication, between peer to peer, friends, colleagues, works, relationships. And one of the four horsemen are like criticizing, perhaps being judgmental, and then the other one is defensiveness, and then the other one is stonewalling, and then goodness, the other one is going away. I'll come back right now. But basically, those can contempt. You see, my brain helped me. So those are things that can really hurt the patient. And when you mentioned about the I statements, Crystal, those are antidotes to those four horsemen, to those interactions. So, for example, perhaps instead of being critical or of the other individual, maybe by using I statement, like we can really help reduce the way the other person might respond, maybe the way they might react, right?
Yes, most definitely.
And then the other one that you were going to say about Memo's comment, or was
Memo's comment? Yes. So basically, the other thing that came up for me is that, well, actually, one of the things that we were talking about, the relationships, like starting your day in the morning, starting it in a nice, gentle way, that can also be applied to the way we start a conversation. So, for example, like you were mentioning, like if I say like, why did you put this cup here? My tone and the way I'm talking might really put the other individual reactive, like it naturally, biologically, because it can pick up on it's going to feel like a perceived
on a
threat. There you go. Like it's going to be like, okay, is this an attack? So if we speak in a more gentle way, it's not to say that the conversation might not go like this, but it's more likely to end that way. And I'm not saying that this out of like nothing. That's some research that Gottman himself has done as well. They've noticed, they've literally word by word, whatever the person is saying, they will look, how did they start the conversation? And then how did it end? How did the conflict resolution occur? So that it can really make a difference whenever we have to bring up something or like a difference that we have with each other, like kind of realizing like, I'm going to go gentle. Like I'm going to bring this issue in a gentle way to reduce from escalating it.
And I think that both of you make good points on the escalation. Um, However, sometimes it's really hard to, at that moment, de-escalate. So another good way to de-escalate is to have those timeouts.
Mhm.
And timeouts, just like when we were kids, when you kind of snapped or you couldn't control yourself, they would send you to your room and it would be kind of like, hey, think about it, and when you're feeling better, come out of there. Well, we can put a timeout on ourselves as well as in a relation, and just saying like, if I'm feeling that I'm dysregulating, or the other person, I can say like, hey, you know what? Why don't we have this conversation in about 5-10 minutes, and let me stay away for right now. Some people, they have a hard time because, for example, they live in a one-room apartment, or maybe there's a little bit of time. But if you even need to go to the restroom, just go there. Just go there for a little bit. As soon as you feel regulated, come out and try it again. Try to speak again with the I messages, with anything that you need to, because if we don't come out of there and we don't try it again, it may become, as you mentioned, one of the four horsemen, um, the stonewalling, and that's something we don't want to do. That we don't speak for days or weeks. We want to make sure that we're able to resolve a situation. If that at that moment, just give it a little bit of time, it will be fine.
And I think
That's right.
that's where like professionals can come in. I know that we made the same point yesterday in the Spanish version of this talk, and how it's important to understand that this is probably easier said than done, because of like four therapists are talking to each other, and this is the world that we live in. So we're like, oh yeah, let's do this and let's do that. And it sounds easy, but we know that it's not. And
No.
so that's why it's important to, if you feel like you need the support or accountability to be able to start using some of these strategies, or understand how your brain works, and really better manage some of these reactions that you're having, either individually or in relationships, then seeking professional help from a therapist or psychologist, somebody who's qualified to help you and walk you through this, would be really important.
Yeah, most definitely. I completely agree with that.
Me too. I think that's a very good point, because I almost see it like a coaching. In some cases, it could feel it's very therapeutic, but also that education portion of it could feel like, okay, I got somebody who can provide that support and guide me, that guidance as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Um, one of the things that I also wanted to mention is that there are differences. There are some cases where um, I do want to like clarify too that if there are circumstances where it really truly is not safe, it might not be a safe environment, and perhaps you might be the individual who's like, well, I've tried this or tried that. But if there is any form of physical abuse or any abuse, by all means, it's not your responsibility and it is not your fault if anything is occurring. So typically when we look at the four horsemen, or we look at like those communication, is like just habits that can come in sometimes without intentionally hurting each other. It's just habits that we can use, or defense mechanisms that we might know how to use, but it's not going past a level of respect, because once we cross that line, we really want to be mindful, and it can lead to other situations. So I just want to make the distinction between like the boundary of respect, and maybe these habits might come up, but then you cross that, and then that's where like it might be abuse. So I just really want to be sensitive to that for individuals if they're victims of a situation where they're receiving something that is not acceptable, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. Right. If there's any kind of abuse, if you're a victim of physical abuse, or even some kind of like
Verbal or emotional
verbal or
too,
emotional, talk to
or
somebody right
sexual.
away. Talk to somebody right away. Get out of there, because
Right.
we don't need to be in the same space just because of our safety. At that moment, it's kind of like, okay, you know what? Let me find somewhere else that's safe as well. If I need to call the police, by all means, I'll call the police. Don't
Right.
don't stay quiet, because this is really important. Do not stay quiet at this moment.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that we can provide people in the comments below or something.
Right.
Putting like the at least for Texas, like the Texas DPS hotline to report abuse, child abuse, and then maybe providing information for the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence here in El Paso. And then just, if you're in in a situation that is abusive sexually, physically, emotionally, whether you're a child or an adult, or you're witnessing that any type of violence, domestic violence, aggression, yeah, you definitely don't have to tolerate that. And there is a line that's crossed. And so you should report those things and feel free to reach out for help.
Yeah, most
Right.
definitely.
And also, each victim of abuse needs to be treated by a professional.
That's right.
I agree.
Most of the times, they don't think of like that. They think, no, I just will speak with my friend, with my mom, with the priest. But no, it's necessary to be treated by a professional.
Yeah, exactly.
And the sooner the better.
Mhm.
Early intervention is really important when it comes to recovery. Um, so the sooner you can get help, the better your outcome will be.
Right. And I think I would like to talk also a little bit about this one of the things that came up, like when I was thinking of like the cognitive reframing, just kind of seeing things from a different perspective, was realizing that this could also be a window of opportunity for many families, for many couples, for many individuals as well, because one of the things that we have noticed is that this situation, the physical distancing, and it could bring to life or bring to awareness like a spotlight, like it can truly magnify parts of our life, both internally or externally, that maybe perhaps we thought were okay, but now have become more apparent to us, more into our awareness as maybe a need. So when I say a window of opportunity, I'm referring to maybe this could be also a place for us to focus on areas of our life that could be approached, could be solved or discussed, maybe could open up conversations. So, for example, if there was differences in a relationship, for perhaps there might have been a strain of some sort, and this brings an opportunity. Well, let's talk about the root of that. And if it feels safe and it feels like, you know what, I am open to talking about that, this might be a window of opportunity for that. Also, I'm thinking about, like, the comment that you made about finances. Like, if this brings to awareness, like, yikes, our finances are really hurting. Maybe, well, let's kind of like take the time and kind of see how we could approach it, or what is it that got us in this place, and maybe what is it that we could do to come and to change our situation and perhaps grow from it, which kind of reminds me of resilience, right? The ability to overcome adversity, overcome challenges, and to grow from them as well, right? What are
Most
your
definitely.
thoughts on that?
I think that now that we're talking about social distancing, I think that you're right. It's a great opportunity to actually have like closer relationships, to bring people closer, and to say, all right, if the people at my home, what can I do to make that relationship a lot better? What can I do to make sure that we're both on the same page, or my kids or my parents, anybody? Let's get on the same page. Let's do more things together now, because it's really really important.
Yeah, but we need to be very conscious of this situation because if we not, we can lose the opportunity of this,
Yep.
and after we'll cry if we not don't take this opportunity. We will cry.
You
We'll be
regret
very,
it,
very
yeah.
late. Very late.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Has
Yes.
anybody asked any questions down there?
In
There's
the
there's messages. There's no questions. If you have any questions, by all means. But we do have just hellos and good afternoons and hellos back. And hi, Crystal. Love that work that you are doing and all the info that's been shared. So you have a fan.
Oh, okay, cool. Hello.
Yeah.
So yeah,
awesome.
but if there's any kind of topic that you wish to that for us to talk about, maybe in another roundtable, or if there's anything, any questions that you have that may be a little bit more private, by all means, just email us. It's info@counselingofelpaso.com. We're here. We want to be able to help. That's why we're doing this. So by all means,
Do you want to give them your information?
yeah. So
Our
this is
information?
our.
Our information. That's right.
So this is Counseling of El Paso. We're at 6955 North Mesa. It's Suite 304, and we're on El Paso. It's almost at Mesa and Wrestler. And if you want to talk to us, our number is 915-209-1234. 209-1234, as Guillermo was saying, the most difficult number that I could think of. And our website is www.counselingofelpaso.com. So we're here, and any questions you have, if you need to find resources, by all means, let us know.
And also we
Yes.
are working with online. Also we are working online for this
Yes,
time.
yeah,
Uh,
at this moment, we're doing it online. We're all bilingual, so English and Spanish.
Yes, and also I wanted to mention you can also follow us on Instagram. It's Helping Hearts, Changing Lives, and then feel free to also like us on our page, and then just share this information. Feel free to share also this conversation that we had, this heart-to-heart conversation.
Most definitely.
Yes.
But I do want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody that is watching us right now, the people that commented. I do want to thank you as well, Jasmine, Crystal, Guillermo, because you guys are doing a wonderful job, and I want to thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you for having us.
Oh,
It's
yes. Thank you
fun.
so much. Yes.
And
Thank you.
so, if you have any topics that you want us to talk about, let us know. We're here.
Mhm.
Yes, most definitely. All righty then. Oh, I also wanted to share too, if you were interested in the webinar, we did upload it. We do have a YouTube page as well, so it's there in case you missed it. The webinar we had that Crystal mentioned 2 weeks ago. And then if you wanted a copy of the presentation, we have it as a PDF as well, and we'd be happy to share it. It's info@counselingofelpaso.com. And then we also have it in English and Spanish in case you would like to share it. We will also put the information on the that we were sharing. We'll add some resources here in the same I guess post. Mhm.
Yes.
All righty then. Well, thank you so much, and maybe a nice little bye. And we hope you guys have a
Bye.
great rest of your day. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye bye.